what's going on? How can you afford 301 new FTEs without an increase in the budget?
Yeah, let me address that. So we do have funding. So we manage our program based upon the funding that we have available. So as mentioned earlier, the LBB did report numbers, but they are expecting those numbers to go down. So as numbers go down, we will adjust our program accordingly. But what we have done is we've had record award in project development and delivery over the current biennium. And as you're aware, with transportation projects, those take anywhere 3 to 5 years in order to continue to pay out on those projects. But the revenues associated with the positions would be included within the appropriations request, but we would not be asking for general revenue to fund those positions.
Okay, but as you're requesting for a lot of more money from us, I just find it odd when someone's like, hey, we need 300 more new employees, but it'll come from somewhere else. It's an odd request.
Well, maybe I can help. When we look at that, and we will look at the employees that we might ask and make the decision to say, hey, look, we believe that we could utilize additional employees. We look at that really from two ways, because as you pointed out, the amount of our funding doesn't change. So the ultimate goal is the delivery and being able to deliver as many projects as possible, as cost effectively as possible, and also to balance that out with the customer service needs as well. And so when we make that request, it's with an eye towards saying, okay, can this make us overall more efficient as a state agency and yield additional product? And that's when what we look at. And so a lot of what we're doing is oriented toward project staff to go toward project delivery efforts, staff to go through construction engineering and inspection efforts.
I get all that. It's just more like, I've been involved in large executive branch agencies and like, hey, if I need 300 more FTEs for something that I've never seen it with, like, oh, but we got enough sitting around to cover the cost. It's an oddity. But I'm happy to follow up further offline with you on that because I'd like to hit a couple other topics here. On the public transportation funding piece, do you have utilization that can really underpin the request for additional funding for this? Like, what systems are you talking about? And do we really have empirical data that could show like a massive increase in demand that would be commensurate with this? Because I mean, while I would recognize it's largely anecdotal, my experience with these systems is that they are nowhere near fully utilized right now. So do you have data that might paint a different picture?
We can share with you the data on the public transportation system utilization and just the operations of those systems in the rural and the urban areas. And that's what we're talking about, is these urban and rural areas. Many of those, I will say, are human services related systems, so oriented toward getting transit-dependent people to doctors, maybe getting them into the larger communities and getting them services that they would not be able to access otherwise. And so you probably will find that the utilization for these services, these transit systems, are different than what you might see in a larger urban area because they have a different function.
Yeah, and on the rule one, if I read it right, it sounded like one of the justifications in there was to make you more competitive for federal grant making. But is it the case that we don't exactly know what the number is going to be. We have no clue if we're going to get the grant. There's a lot of things happening at the federal level, thank God, regarding federal grant making authorities and policies. I mean, am I reading that right? You want a whole bunch more money so that you can be more competitive for a grant that we have no idea if we're going to get.
Well, there's $25 million in there that would go toward helping to be part of the state match that would go toward federal grants. And oftentimes when federal grants come out, if we don't have a state match to go along with them or a local match to go along with them, then we do have the ability to use transportation development credits as an offset to that, and I won't go into all the details of that, but I will just say that does tend to make us less competitive in being able to pull down those federal grants.
So what if we give you the $25 million and you don't get the federal grant? What happens to that $25 million?
We would still use it for that purpose. Based upon the numbers that we've seen, there's about a $20 million deficit per year. So this would go towards helping relieve that. But first, we would want to try to leverage other dollars in order to be able to maximize the use of that investment.
Okay. Let me switch gears somewhat dramatically, but also something that I was came across in reading the LAR that surprised me. So you're TxDOT, which stands for Texas Department of Transportation, correct?
That's right.
Y'all build roads,
Yes.
bridges,
Yes.
rail.
Yes,
You've got a civil rights division.
we do.
You have an Office of Civil Rights. Why?
Well, the Office of Civil Rights exists to administer programs that are governed by federal law and regulation and state law and regulation. Those include our disadvantaged business enterprise programs and our historically underutilized business programs. And I did see your tweet that you put out. Appreciate calling your attention to that. We ensured that website was updated to clearly clarify what that division does and their purpose of their function and how they interrelate with their counterparts at the federal level. They're within the USDOT. There's 6 different offices of civil rights that we have to work with because of the requirements in the administration of federal funds.
Well, yeah, I was going to bring the website up in a second, but since you raised it, I'll jump right into that. Because this is, and I printed out this morning, this is what the homepage for your Civil Rights Division at TxDOT looks like as of right now. But you alluded to something a second ago that maybe it didn't look like this very recently. Okay, so there have been changes to this website.
Yes, sir.
How recently?
They were made over the weekend.
Okay. Yeah, so, because this is pretty consistent with what you just said, although I do still want to come back to some of this, especially on the hubs. But 2 days ago, it looked like this. Is this accurate?
I believe that's, I can't read it from here, but
Yeah,
I know
it
what
looked
you're
right.
referring to, and
So
I think
there,
you're holding it up.
what I've highlighted here is language that was on your website over the weekend, and I about fell out of my chair when I read this. So on the homepage of the TxDOT Civil Rights Division, you're bragging that the TxDOT, so our Department of Transportation, is promoting diversity and inclusion opportunities, and then explicitly engaged in affirmative action activities. What were you doing 2 days ago to promote diversity and inclusion and affirmative action?
Well, I want to first of all say, I appreciate you bringing that to my attention. And what we did was we wanted to review that and ensure that what is conveyed is consistent with what our mission is. As you know, or may be aware, the Governor Abbott about 3 months ago, or 3 weeks ago, issued an executive order that spoke to that and spoke to the importance of affirming that as an organization, we need to ensure that that the work that we do as an agency equally protects individuals under the law, and that's what we want to consistently do. And we want to remove any kind of terminology that might suggest otherwise. And so that was the intent, was to remove that terminology that would be construed or maybe confused with efforts that we don't do as a department.
No, yeah, and I very much appreciate the governor issuing that executive order. I do have a copy of it here in my hands. I have been, for months now, posting daily examples of our state agencies using taxpayer funds to promote DEI. And I very much appreciate the governor taking that action. But I have very real concerns, and I would love to understand, because you say clarifying terminology, I would like to know what was TxDOT doing regarding DEI that led y'all to have this on the front page of your website?
Well, as I said before, we support the governor's executive order and his direction in that area. We're working to administer our programs consistent with that executive order and with federal and state law that covers that.
Okay.
Everything that we're doing is consistent with federal and state law.
And I appreciate that, but you can understand, like 30 hours ago, the website looked very differently. Although I certainly appreciate change, but I do want to know, like, were there any actual substantive changes? Like, were staff reprogrammed or retasked? Were any staff eliminated?
I would say that what was outlined on that web page and how it was interpreted is a mischaracterization of what we do as an agency.
Okay, well, then okay. I want to talk about what you do as an agency, as in particular as the Civil Rights Division. How big is the Civil Rights Division?
Civil Rights Division has around 50 employees in it.
15 or 50?
50.
50.
50.
FTEs. What's the budget?
The budget of that,
Yeah.
do you have that?
We don't have that offhand, but we can provide that to you.
What's a swag?
I don't have that. I don't want to give you an inaccurate number, but happy to provide that number to you.
Yeah, I would say the budget is around $5 million.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Because it is in your LAR, this office. So around $5 million, you said?
Yes, sir.
And around 50 FTEs. What
So I'm sorry, the FTE budget is probably around 5 million. The overall budget of what they do is around 10 million.
10
Yes.
on top of the 5?
I believe that that includes the 5,
Includes
but
the
we'll
5?
clarify that.
Okay,
with
so
you.
we're somewhere between $5 and $15 million.
Yes, sir.
I'm guessing it's on the higher end. Okay, so you said that the original, like, what was on your website over the weekend, again, first, like, homepage, top paragraph, first sentence. Half of it is just, we just mischaracterized what we're doing. So I would ask you, like, how would you characterize what the Civil Rights Division does? Like, what would be the top 1 or 2 bullets?
Well, I think as you see what's articulated on the website today, that's a fair characterization and a more accurate characterization of what they do. They administer our programs that are set forth in both federal and state law associated with the disadvantaged business enterprises and the historically underutilized businesses, but they also have other federally directed requirements. Most of these do come down from the federal level, and to date, those statutes and those regulations haven't changed.
Okay, so I hear that, and I appreciate that. But let's also talk about current, because you want to make a distinction between language that was on your website 30 hours ago versus what we're contemplating as a House committee today. I'm holding a copy of your LAR that is the most current LAR, the only one I've gotten, that we are all looking at as we sit here for the Civil Rights Division. The first 4 words of it, not buried somewhere, the first 4 words of your LAR that you have presented to this committee, I'm going to read them to you. The Civil Rights Division, again, the number one thing you say you're doing for us to fund you, promotes diversity, equity, and inclusion.
So that
But this was just somehow kind of a mischaracterization on your website, but it's the number one thing you send to us in your budget request. How can that be?
Well, it sounds like that was taken from the website or was captured from that. So I apologize.
Well, hang on.
It's a
So stuff. Well, hang on. We got a
mischaracterization.
far bigger problem if that's true, because you're telling me the stuff that you're submitting for your LARs is just some staffer pulled from a website that, by the way, had no basis in reality. And let me go further. Let me read the rest of the sentence to you. All right. Here's the rest of the sentence. Your LAR. TxDOT, Civil Rights Division, promotes inclusion, diversity, and equity, and accessibility in the internal and external operations of the department. The Civil Rights Division collaborates with districts, divisions, and external stakeholders to uphold these values through a variety of economic development programs for workforce and small businesses, blah, blah, blah. The entirety of your LAR, with the exception of you got to comply with the Civil Rights Act and the ADA, the entirety of your LAR is predicated on your internal and external operations to promote DEI. So please tell the committee what are some of those internal and external activities that you have been doing to promote DEI.
Well, I've addressed what our activities are, and those activities are consistent with state and federal law. I apologize that what you're seeing in the LAR might lead you to think otherwise. I'll affirm what our
So you're
position
telling
is.
me right now that the Civil Rights Division was not doing anything to promote DEI.
Telling you right now that the work that our Civil Rights Division is consistent with state and federal law and programs, and I'll work to ensure that that continues to be the process.
Are you disputing that the entirety of your budget request for this 50-person FTE office is predicated on your promotional activities inside and outside the department on DEI?
I'm saying that would be a mischaracterization of it, yes. And I
What would be the implications of that for all your other LARs? How many of your LARs just came from some random staffer pulling language from your website that, again, is apparently, according to you, completely divorced from the activities of the department? What are the 50 FTEs doing? Because your entire LAR says they're doing DEI.
Well, I've covered what they're doing, sir.
Yeah, you've covered what you're telling me they're doing. It strains credulity, respectfully. But let's talk about some of the stuff that is still on your website that you've referenced here. Does TxDOT ever offer employment or make contract determinations to somebody, an individual or an entity that would not have received it otherwise, but for any consideration regarding that individual or that entity's race?
Only as may be required under state and federal law.
So you may be doing it, but you're saying you may be required to do it by a statute.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the state of Texas is apparently letting contracts and making employment decisions that are predicated on race. Did I hear you say that correctly?
I said we follow the law, sir.
And are doing it?
We follow the law.
Got it. Okay. Do you think it's legally and ethically appropriate for the Texas government to discriminate on individuals or businesses on the basis of their race?
Discrimination is wrong, sir.
But we are making employment determinations, as your testimony just elucidated to the committee, based on their race, as at least a factor.
Not employment determinations, no, sir.
Contracts.
Contracts as the law requires.
Got it. So we are making contract determinations based on race in the state of Texas.
Based on
You're going to
state-
have to understand this is going to be very frustrating to me, and I think to many, many millions of Texans. So you said no employment determinations. That's your position, right?
Right.
Okay. Let's talk about contracts then. Roughly how many contracts have been let where race played at least some component in the determination to let that or to award that contract?
Based upon our latest hub report that goes to the comptroller under state law, the amount of contracting work that went to a variety of eligible hub entities, that includes racial, sex, and even veteran-owned, it's probably around $1 billion of the work that we contract.
$1 billion.
That's on the
$1 billion
it's on the
worth
comptroller's
of
website.
contracts, which, by the way, are paid for by my constituents, may have been awarded, at least in part, based on somebody's race.
Based on the law, both at the state and the federal level.
But you're either saying yes or you're at least not denying it. Okay, so that's happening, roughly about $1 billion. Does TxDOT, do you have any comparative analytics, any type of comparison or data to inform the taxpayers who are paying for all this? And by the way, I do not believe 30 million Texans support race-based contract determinations. And I can't say that more forcefully. Do we have any comparison of the cost to my constituents between like an average contract that would have been awarded based solely on merit versus the contracts that were let using race as a determination?
I'm not aware of any information on that.
No
sir.
idea. Would you guess that the contracts that were awarded based on something other than merit were more expensive or less expensive than contracts that were based?
I'm not able to speculate on that, sir.
No idea. I'm pretty sure anybody with some common sense knows they probably aren't lower, because there'd be no need then. So Texas taxpayers, but what I'm hearing here, are spending more money. Not only are we making determinations on the basis of race, we're probably spending more tax dollars than we otherwise would have to do so.
So let me just add one bit of information. So we do have
Please,
a low bid.
anything to help me with this.
Sure, absolutely. So we do have a low bid process. So if you look, as we noted, we have 89% of our funding goes towards project development delivery. Obviously, the biggest component of that is our highway construction contracts, and those are all low bid contracted amounts.
I appreciate it. I'm not sure that helps with the materiality of the issue of Texans being forced to have their tax dollars weaponized against their values by letting contracts on the basis of race. But thank you. How much in total would you say it costs TxDOT to administer all of your programs that apparently take race into some kind of a consideration?
Well, we've talked about what the budget is for the Civil Rights Division, so it would probably be captured in that.
For the administration piece. But in terms of contracts that were let under those, pursuant to those policies, I heard over $1 billion a second ago, right? Roughly?
Yes.
Okay. I just have to tell you it's outrageous. I have a very hard time believing that the story that like your entire LAR is just made up. And I think I speak on behalf of millions of Texans who quite frankly are already overtaxed. I don't even know how many of my constituents are terrified they're going to lose their homes or their property. And the last thing they want, their tax dollars, which we take from them by force. The government, the state of Texas has no money. The only money we have is the people's money that we take from them by force. And the last thing they want to have done with their tax dollars is to have it weaponized against their values in the pursuant of facially racist DEI and or contract or employment practices, which it sounds like at least the vast majority of that, you're not even going to contest, has been happening at the Texas Department of Transportation. So I will plan to follow up with you and other members of your leadership team offline, but I appreciate you to be here today, but this is absolutely outrageous. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? If they're not, I usually try to do my questions at the end, so give Mark, I'm going to go